Hello, 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 and I'm just getting us all on the screen. Welcome to Gaming the System, where four intersectional feminists talk about gaming through a feminist lens. Tonight, we are talking about the hypersexualisation of women in games. Which basically is what we always end up talking about at some point generally. So we might as well talk about it as a whole topic. And I'm going to let all of you kick off, whoever's just going to shout out first, with what are our worst examples we've seen? What are the worst examples we've seen? What do we actually mean by the hypersexualisation of women in gaming? So, Alex, what do you think?
Okay, well, in my notes, I've put down, this is the one example I could probably talk about the most, which would be, of course, Lara Croft in Tomb Raider, being a fan of Tomb Raider since the 1990s.
That Lara Croft there.
Yes, that Lara Croft there. And I think probably the worst examples, as that screenshot shows, is actually from the marketing around the games rather than in the games themselves, especially early on. If you look at the in-game sort of character of Lara, you know, all the polygons where it shows her as she was in Tomb Raider 1, it's not actually too bad when you look at the images.
I mean, I think she could do with longer shorts.
Compared.
I feel those aren't practical for climbing around a tomb.
I would say not.
Get scratches, cuts.
You get scrapes all over your knees and everything. Just not good. But yeah, no, I could probably do quite a deep dive on Tomb Raider because, as I say, I've been playing it since the mid-90s. But I think I wrote down 3 examples from the classic series of things that stood out to me. The first of which is the very end of Tomb Raider 2, where Lara, after you've completed the game and there's a bunch of thugs that come around her house and you have to get rid of them all. And she's taking a shower and about to strip off and then turns to the camera, breaks the fourth wall and says, "I think you've seen enough, don't you?" And then points the shotgun at the screen, which I thought was quite a cool example of breaking the fourth wall. But it's all the boys could talk about in the playground at primary school. I remember whenever conversations came up was to press triangle to see her boobs at the end of the game. I don't think it actually worked ever, but yeah, that was the main topic of conversation. And then I think it was Tomb Raider Chronicles, so that was like the 5th game in the classic series. There's a level you play as a Lara who's 16 years old, and in the cutscene before the mission, you see her just as she's about to take her top off, so she's got this far, and then stops because someone knocks on the door. And then the last example, which I think is probably one that would need to come with a content warning, because I was quite uncomfortable when I watched it, was in Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness, where the character Curtis, who's this playable male character, comes in and kind of, he sort of searches her for weapons, but from behind, and his hands sort of come around her and slide over her tummy and stuff, and it's just creepy. I remember I must have been about, I don't know, maybe 13 or so when I played it the first time, and I just remember thinking, gosh, I think Lara must be feeling very uncomfortable right now, and just feeling generally uncomfortable watching it. So
yeah, and I think that's something particularly as women gamers, as feminist gamers, though, is like, I think that people don't get that, oh, you're just making a fuss about boobs. It's like, well, no, actually, it's the fact we genuinely feel uncomfortable.
It was something that was meant to be sexy, like the introduction of the character of Curtis, but it just ended up feeling really wrong.
It's like really uncomfortable. You can't watch James Bond movies for pretty much the same reason. But anyway, that's a completely different area of discussion. Matt, what would you like to tell us about the most egregious examples of hypersexualisation of women?
So probably the one that I have mentioned multiple times since we've started even the initial phase of talking about this podcast. It is Quiet from the Metal Gear Solid series. Have you got a picture for us?
I do. There we go.
There's picture number 1. So,
and again, a very impractical outfit, I feel, for the situation, but also not really an outfit. That is underwear. That is literally underwear.
There's a very interesting piece of plot, which is why she looks like that. But the takeaway of context, she's a woman just entirely meant to be just utterly sexy. and she doesn't speak as well. See, egregious. I think egregious was the word that we wrote down. So in the when we were like texting, talking about getting ready for this, and I was thinking about the sort of the funny side, because Quiet, it's a bit funny because it's so over the top. Lara Croft, it's a bit funny. But then what I hope we're going to go into is the darker side of it, the side that Alex just mentioned about a man frisking a 16-year-old girl, and the fact that Quiet is tortured and she is almost raped, and that she is beaten, that she doesn't have a voice, when these sexualizations of women are sending a dangerous message to particularly men and young men. So young men in their formative years, perhaps, coming across these things. I think, oh, this is supposed to be sexy because this is aimed at me, like the Lara Croft turning around in the shower thing. That was something. Probably a man wrote that scene. A man created Lara Croft. A man animated that scene. So it's men creating content for men in the sort of content that they want to see. So that's
and I have to say, like, uploading all the photos and videos that you guys sent me, not much fun. Some of it, I have to say, is like, it's all sort of laughs and stuff. I mean, Crash Bandicoot, that one's made me laugh a lot, but it's the darker side of it, which we will talk about more. But Jem, what's your worst example then? Hypersexualization of women in video games.
Well, I think you have covered it really. I mean, Lara Croft is probably the one that stands out the most for me, just in what I've come across. But I do find the characters in Final Fantasy, the Final Fantasy series, quite problematic for various reasons. But I recently played Final Fantasy 15. I always get the numbers wrong, and I found Cindy, the mechanic in that game.
This one?
No, she's the yellow. She's got yellow.
That's T for Lockhart.
Yeah, there you go. That's Cindy. Yeah, it's interesting actually, because my daughter came in when I was looking at these images, and she was just like, when she came in. So even she recognized that it was something about it. And I think the thing is that, I mean, it's more of a problem in this game, because this game is about 5 young men going around having an adventure, and it's sort of the lads and on tour really, and they're the only female characters in the game are Cindy, and then you've got Luna Freya, who's the damsel in distress, and she always wears white. So you've got a lot of the stereotypical characters. Yeah, that's Luna Freya on the left there, and so I think that's where it's that sort of subtle, just there as you're playing along. Oh, it's fine that she's wearing this ridiculous outfit. And when I was looking for images, I found so many pictures where people had deliberately lined up the characters so that it would make it look like one of the characters was looking down her top. You know, that it opens up the characters in the games to be sexually harassed by the players, and I'm not very comfortable with that. And I think, there is a distinct there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there is a link between those playing at that kind of behavior and then going out into the world. I'm not saying that computer games cause violent crime, but there is something about it's okay. This is an objectification of women in this way is not just acceptable, but it's fun. It's a game. It's an okay thing.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the Donkey. Who uploaded the Donkey Kong example?
No one's owning up.
No one's admitting that. All right, fine. Well, it's on there. And the thing is like, I mean, it does open it up to even lovely characters. So I was looking for my examples of some nice normal characters. I was trying to find a nice picture of the women of Stardew Valley. I just Google image searched the women of Stardew Valley. Dear God, how many mods are there out there to tart up the women of Stardew Valley and give them huge breasts and all this stuff? And I think it's one of those things that there is almost a pressure on game makers to do. So I quite often talk about, I love playing 7 Days to Die. Shouldn't do. It's a terrible game. I hate the developers in so many ways, but I do like playing the game. It's a post-apocalyptic world. You get the zombies, you get to build, you get to do whatever you like. I like those games where I can create my own house and spend time doing things and kill zombies. And one of the traders that exists in this post-apocalyptic world is Trader Jen. And 7 Days to Die has been in alpha for about a century, and in Alpha 17 Trader Jen looked like a normal person, and then Alpha 19 came out, and I've put the wrong picture up now. And there you see, now that is my comparison of what Jen used to look like on the left, and then what did all those developers spend that time doing? They made her cans bigger, and lessened the doctor aspect and made her look more like a nurse and all this stuff. And it's just, it's tiresome when you're playing games as a woman to have to constantly look at this stuff. So why do we think
one thing?
Interject.
As the token male,
yes.
I'm thinking, before anyone thinks, who is this holier than thou man who thinks he's the best feminist who ever has existed and he's got no flaws? If I was on the Guilty Feminist, I would say I'm a feminist, but when I was younger, all of this stuff was awesome to me. I loved the shit out of it. And even now, I love naked women. Naked women are great. I'll come clean on that. But it's completely fine for any straight cis men listening. It's completely fine to like naked women, as long as you recognize the reality that is being shared behind it and the problems of the problematic areas of it. So I just wanted to put that as this disclaimer up.
No, and absolutely. And as a bisexual woman looking at, this image here of Harley Quinn, I was sending a message to my friends going, I've got mixed feelings looking at this image here, Obviously, this is terrible objectification, but also it's Harley Quinn, and I love Harley Quinn, and she's so cool, and I have all sorts of... So, yeah, absolutely, there is that sort of... Nobody's saying you shouldn't be able to fancy people in games. I mean... Mass Effect, the deluxe edition's coming out now. We've got a release date.
You said that's the only reason you play Mass Effect.
Exactly.
Shagging the other characters.
I saw a really interesting thread on Twitter of people going like, which person do you plan to romance first in Mass Effect? And somebody had replied and said, saying, obviously it's Caden. And then somebody was like, well, that's a weird way of spelling Garrus. And I was like, yeah, obviously Garrus. Anyway. We're getting too deep into that now. But yeah, so why though? I mean, if we look at the general world of media, if we look at TV, we look at films, we look at adverts even, there has become less of a, you're not just allowed to put women in skimpy bikinis all the time. I'm not saying it never happens, but, we are past the days of the glamorous assistant in her underwear draped over the car or whatever and stuff like that. Why do we think it persists in gaming so much? Why in gaming is it still almost impossible to have a female character in a fight scene wearing something that actually covers her navel or gives any genuine armor protection in this case of a sword fight? Because I really worry. I wouldn't want to do it. Anyway, what do you think, Matt? What's the problem? What's holding us back?
Well, it struck me that in all these other forms of media, you need to actually get a woman to do the things that you want her to do. In a video game, you just need to animate it. You've got to have a man someone willing to animate it. I'm not saying it's just men, because if it's your career and you want to be a character artist and you're a woman and your director says, no, we want bigger boobs, and you go, oh, actually, I don't think that's very good, and you stand up, then you're going to be called difficult, and you're going to be called a pain in the arse to work with, and you're going to get bad references. So women, as always are in these environments, they are forced to do things that they would not choose to do. because of the powerful people above them. So yeah, that's part of my impression as to why it still happens so much.
Alex, what do you think?
Well, I thought in my notes, the only notes I've got for this question, because it was quite a hard one, was that it's not real, it's just virtual, which is perhaps the excuse that some people would hide behind, because it's, like Matt says, it's not something that real people have to do or put themselves in those situations, because it's created. It's therefore more likely to be the way that it is, perhaps because of the people that are creating it. And that's all I've got, because it's quite a difficult question, really.
No, it's not an easy one to ask. And I think it's more of a political question in some ways. But Jem, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's a political one. I think it's to do with who is running the industry. I think that, you know, there's a lot of men running the industry at the moment, and I think there's still this idea that the audience is primarily male, so they are still designing everything for the male gaze. I also think that if you're a female gamer who's kind of grown up in the games world like I am, there is an element of conditioning. So you expect your female characters to look sexy. You kind of, you know, often want to look cool and sexy in your armor. And to be brutally honest, sensible armor doesn't normally look very sexy. You know, it's quite functional. And so I think, you know, there's a thing about, you know, who do I want to look at, who do I want to see when I'm running along, what kind of view do I want from behind, you know, and all of those things. And I think the problem is that we are a conditioned society, and then we go in, and in our idealistic worlds we want to have idealistic figures and idealistic outfits. And I think there is a big problem that as a result, perhaps the kickback hasn't been big enough. Perhaps we don't argue the case enough to shift the thing. But I do think it is moving, actually. I do think it's moving. I think there are sensible armors. I think Mass Effect is a good example of that. I think Dragon Age Inquisition, which I know is about 100 years old, but I am playing right now. And that is, you know, that has decent armors. It also has ridiculous armors that are like body paint, but it does have sensible armors in. So I think there is a movement towards it. But then when you take games like Fortnite or Overwatch, you know, which are massively popular, then I think then it all goes out the window again, and you're just sort of, you know, head in hands. You know, I mean, Fortnite is a really good example, because with Fortnite you get you're automatically assigned a gender, which is great, so you don't choose it, but they're both hypersexualized. They're both very idealized physiques and clothing. Well,
we have a user comment. We have a user comment here from Daniel Erickson, whoever he is. But it's saying that, is this possibly because games have been outside the mainstream spotlight until now? Is it because gaming hasn't received the sort of focal attention that movies and TV and various other media have, that has put that pressure on them to remove the hypersexualization? And I slightly agree with that, but I also slightly, I don't know how skewed my perspective is. It's like gaming has always been a huge part of my life. So
we've been in that bubble, haven't we?
In the spotlight is a sort of weird one. I in fact saw something it was on Reddit, and it was talking about girl gamers, and it was one of these horrible threads where somebody had said something horribly abusive. But what was interesting about it is it was somebody complaining about a girl gamer and how they're all awful. And he said, when it's not fashionable anymore, they'll all piss off then. And it was like, what? So gaming's fashionable at the moment, is it? I realised that wasn't the important part of the thread, but that was the bit that really struck me. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that.
That's a very odd thing to say.
I don't know, Jem, if you want to mention the "what about men" comment you got, or we can just talk about it more generally.
Or is, you know,
you don't want to name names. This.
I mean, no, I think that is an issue, isn't it? I mean, that's the male characters are also very idealized, aren't they? I mean, you know, and increasingly so, these very extremely muscular men with tiny torsos and enormous shoulders, and I think, you know, there's definitely is some hypersexualization going on in general, and it seems, I think the shame is that as gaming, I'm with you, Caroline. I think gaming isn't behind the scenes. I think it is actually very mainstream in a way that we don't really appreciate it. You know, that a massive amount of people are gaming. So, you know, I think that's not a good enough excuse. But I think the shame is that as we've recognized that female characters can lift a gun too, we've just, rather than desexualize them, we've started to sexualize the men. And I just think, you know, it's just, that's just really problematic for me, this whole thing.
I think a key issue with the what about men arguments, which made me want to smash my head into the table counter when I read it, is the false equivalency. So someone said, we're going to talk about hypersexualization of women in gaming, and someone says, oh, what about men? And I go, okay. Then we say, yeah, there are some sexualized men, and you point that someone's just pointed out Gear of War, in which case all the men, and I think the women are big and butch as well. But the problem when you look at men, like say with Thor in the Marvel universe or Kratos, their sexualization is matched with their power. Mm. You have big muscles, which means you're powerful. If you're a woman who looks like quiet, then that isn't a sign of, meant to be a sign of power. It's just meant to be a sign of sexiness. It diminishes them rather than builds them up. So that's part of the false equivalency that comes with any what about men argument.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I'm not going to use that segue right now, because I was going to use that segue in a bit, but I think that's the really key point, is like, what is the byproduct of that sexualization? And that while, you know, Henry Cavill in The Witcher, I mean, I could talk about that for hours. That is a handsome man, but you know, but does it put him at risk? Does it put other men at risk? The fact that the objectifying way that I may happen to look at Henry Cavill, probably not.
I was going to jump in and mention the issue about body image and just the ideal body. It's not a new thing. It's been going on for centuries, right the way back to like ancient Greek times. When you think about Grecian statues, you always see like really strong athletic men and like, you know, just really thin, beautiful women. And I think, you know, it's not a new thing. So we've got centuries and centuries of this kind of ingrained into our heads that that's the ideal body. And that's how it's going to be. So I think that is kind of reflected in a lot of our media, even now, still. Yeah. And I did put in my notes just fat phobia. I don't know if that's a thing that we should be talking about. But again, that might be a separate issue. I don't know. But it's worth raising the point.
You're allowed to talk about anything you like, Alex.
It's worth raising the point because...
Got a camera on you, it's fine.
You know, like how often can anyone name a video game protagonist that's actually fat?
Yeah.
You know.
No, and I was thinking about this when I was thinking about what are the good examples that we've seen that we've done right. And actually that was why I started looking for Stardew Valley, because like one of the characters, so my Discord icon is Pam from Stardew Valley, who is an alcoholic old woman who's a little bit larger and drives the local bus. But she's not horrific. She's not anything. She's just a normal person character. But I just wanted to, before we move back to that, is talk about the political side, which is, of course, the game industry itself. So like Lisa's raised here, wondering if designers caught on to the fact that young people are more woke and are demanding better, would that equal better sales? And I think that the video game industry, we've had a few articles over the last few years saying that, you know, the games industry has had its Me Too moment. And I can't remember the names and details of this particular case, which is probably good because I suspect I'd be libeling somebody if I did go too much details. But there was a very recent case where a games company was given an award by the EU. It was given a grant and an award. And it is a company that is run by a man who has been accused of sexual harassment by a large number of women. And he is still working, he's still running his own company, he's still managing to get money from the EU as a reward. And I think that it's one of the reasons we've seen such good changes in film and TV is when women have stepped up and when women have been able to, as you say, Matt, like they're the ones who are able to go, let's not make the boobs ridiculous this time, you know, stuff like that. So the other aspect of it, and wonderfully, our Twitch comment that I've just got is exactly what I was about to segue into, which is about the fact that the sex as a prize, that so often in games it is used that as a reward you get a woman as a sex object, as a prize, etc. How do we feel about that? Any examples? Anything you wanted to put across about that? The Witcher being actually quite a bad example for that as well.
Yeah. So, early, the first Witcher game, you got like a playing card with a beautiful sketch of the naked woman that you just conquered by either saving her life or doing her a favor. And in the God of War games, for I think the 9 prequel games, there was a sex mini game where you have to. It's like a quick time event where you press square, then you jiggle the analog stick, and then you press them both at the same time, and on and on and on and on. I don't know much about those ones, but yeah. So, and then at the end you get a load of red orbs. So it's for a gameplay reason as well. So yeah. So again, that's another one of those things that it seems it's playful and it's fun and it's not a big deal. But then you think about how take a step back and think about what it means that this has been included in a game. It doesn't just exist. It was created by someone. It was approved by someone. It was designed by someone and then shipped out into the world. And it's that pipeline that is the problem. Things need to change along that pipeline in order for things to change.
Yeah, I mean, Alex or Jem, I don't know if either of you ever played Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, only the most recent one, number 5.
Fair enough. I mean, because GTA 3 back when that was out was, again, when I was a stupid young teenager. So to me, it was, I wouldn't say amusing, but it was just part of the game that, you know, you would get a hooker and then kill them afterwards to get your money back. And that was just like, and it was considered almost a standard way of playing in the game. And again, it's a sign of how desensitized and systematically you just go, oh yeah, that's just what you do. Oh, isn't that funny? And like, as you say, Matt, you think for a second, hang on, somebody's actually thought about that and has actually designed it.
And it's always, so so this is, it's all aimed mainly at straight men and straight boys. But you will definitely find, particularly the further back you go, that 99% of all that work designed to turn on horny young men is done by horny old men.
Yes. Which is even creepier when you think about it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, in fact, I might just bring up the horrible example that you found, Matt. And I am going to put a content warning now, right? Because this is just creepy AF. I'm sorry, I hate it. But Matt had found this game, mobile phone game. Where's it gone? Have I just managed to remove it because it upset me so much? which was Kiss of War. Ew. In which, so Matt, is there a plot to this game?
I don't know. I haven't played it. I've just, for some reason, which doesn't reflect very well on me, it keeps on coming up in my studying, in my ad like replicate recommendations, and I keep on going, oh, I'll use this. I can screenshot this for the podcast, and then it sends me another one.
I want to show you a very quick bit of the trailer until I'm sickened by it. See, what the trailer doesn't show is the bit that's in the image, which is rescue her and be her hero. It's a woman tied up in war, and you can go and rescue her and be her hero.
And she's got blood down the side of her mouth because she's been beaten up.
Yeah, it's just the fact that people designing these are horrible. So I suppose that, what we were almost flirting around earlier was the fact is, like, what are the dangerous implications of this? Why does this matter? Why? And I suppose, because we are all feminists, we're sitting there going, yeah, obviously we see the link between this and violence against women and girls. But it's like, why does it matter to you? Why do you think, if you could get the horrible, annoyingest little Rust-playing, reeing 14-year-old boy in front of you and explain to him why this matters and actually get him to listen, what would you say? What is the most important thing?
Well, shall I go just because that I sent in those images and just talk,
Yes.
so I can explain I can explain why I sent those in, not just some voyeuristic wanting to show everyone. So that video that I sent, that was one of 6 adverts that I saw that was sent to me by the ad thing, and that was the tamest of all of them. That one's just some jiggling and some sexy over-sexualized women. That's one thing where you can go, ha ha, funny, and then laugh it off. But then you look at what that image represents, which is a woman tied up, looking scared, with blood down the side of her mouth, going, she's been hurt and she's desperate for you to save her, and implying that if you save her, then you'll get something sexual in return. And
I've got this one as well for you, Matt.
Yeah. So again, she's a poor whelp who has no power and needs you to save her, implying that you'll get something sexual from her. The other adverts where it takes a very dark turn, because there are some of them where you choose your soldier from a row of women who are hung up by their arms, hanging in like a Gestapo torture chamber. And you swipe them along, you spin them around to take a good look, and then you pick one. And that is real. There's such a deep darkness to that if you really sit back for a second and go into what that means, what that's telling people who haven't. So like you were saying, you don't notice it. I didn't notice stuff like this when I was younger because it was just part of how things were. It's just how things were. And now when you look at things like that, some of it is just harmless fun, but things like that is the stuff that needs to change, because that is the stuff that is dangerous. That is what is training the minds of particularly young men to view women as commodities that are something, as the fantastic comment said earlier, women are objects to be won, to be owned, to be commodified. And that is spread across all media and is a profoundly dangerous pillar of the patriarchy.
Alex, why does hypersexualization of women in games worry you?
I would agree with what Matt said. I think the danger is that it normalizes it. And if you've been in gaming since you were young, it kind of makes it normal from a very young age, which is even more dangerous because, it then becomes ingrained in your thinking that it's okay, or somehow that it's not telling the full story because it's just brushing over it and saying, well, it's a fun game that you're playing. You don't need to worry about it. I think the danger is that it's especially nowadays with kids, it's more of a constant than it was when we were younger, I would say. I think it's more common now, I think, maybe for kids to be gamers than it was perhaps when we were younger. I don't know if it's because we were in our gaming bubble, it just felt like a normal thing to do. I just think it just normalizes it, and that's not appropriate because it just needs to be talked about on a wider stage and explained as to why this is wrong. It's because it's making it into a commodity and making it okay for women to be sort of used and almost sold and things, like how they were strung up and stuff. It's just not at all a good thing.
Because one of the things that worries me as well is that, because obviously conventions and cosplay is so popular, but if your only option is to dress up as the obvious examples there. Then it's like, I mean, Jem, I don't know, did you want to? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's more of an issue these days because graphics have got so good, and so what we're not dealing with little pixelated damsels in distress now. We're dealing with, you know, almost movie quality, you know, almost live action quality.
Yeah, that picture of the old Final Fantasy to the new one.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that almost illustrates the issue there. As like, yeah, she's wearing exactly the same thing. But...
yeah,
and I think
absolutely it does, and I think that the problem is that these games can come straight into your phone, you know, and you know, I think a lot of those ones that you were just talking about were mobile games. So, you know, these are things that young people are very easily able to access. They're not having to go out and spend 60, 70 pounds on them. You know, they're throwaway games. I remember a few years ago hearing about research done into the impact of comedy on sexism and you know, sexist jokes, and were they just a joke, and is it just, you know, mean old feminists ruining everyone's fun? But actually what they were saying is that, you know, comedy is a very powerful tool for changing opinion and for influencing opinion, and making something just a joke is you know, a very good way of changing an opinion, changing a view, insinuating things into conversation. I don't know if the same research has been done into games, but I'm willing to guess that there's another similar thing going on there, because it's that subtle it's okay, it's just a game. It's okay.
It's interesting because so much of the research into games has always been focused on violence, not violence against women and girls, which of course, as we know, is a different thing. It's always been, does video games cause violence? Do video games make you go and shoot up your high school? All that sort of stuff. Most of which the evidence says no, they don't.
Doesn't.
There is, but it's that societal way you treat people, the society way you think of people. And I think stand-up comedy was a great example actually to bring up, because you look at stand-up comedy even 10 years ago, people like Frankie Boyle, David Mitchell, even I'd say David Baddiel as well. A lot of them used to make jokes that were very, Matt Lucas being a very good example as well, used to make jokes that they, at the time 10 years ago, would say as, you know, bloody feminists ruining our fun, won't let us make our jokes anymore. There has been a massive shift in comedy, and I've seen a lot of interview with those particular comedians saying, actually, I regret a bit the jokes I used to make, and I wouldn't make those jokes now. And now I've thought about it and reflected on it. Richard Herring's another one as well. It's massively changed. So I could do a whole podcast about stand-up comedy now. But I think it's about that. How do we shift that? And I think one of the nice things about doing this podcast is that there's been a lot of people who said there is very few people talking about feminism in gaming. They're talking about the lack of feminism in gaming, but not talking about actually doing feminism in gaming. And because a lot of people feel very scared. A lot of people keep saying to me, you stream that on Twitch, you're going to get abusive comments all day. We've had one Twitch comment and it was lovely and supportive. And I think that shows that there is some space to be taken up, you see. I also very much just wanted to find an opportunity to bring in Daniel's comment about mensels in distress, because that amused me. And also, as Anya points out, you know, Fable 2, Fat Bald Man Hero, it's not always hypersexualized. So go on, I feel we've got gloomy and dark now. I want positives. I want, what are the games where there are women characters that we like? As I say, Stardew Valley's my go-to at the moment. I mean, that's because I'll let you talk about them then, Jem. Who's your favourite woman in Stardew Valley, Jem?
Oh, Penny.
Really?
I'm planning to marry her, so that's why.
I always find it very hard to get on with Penny. I very rarely end up friends with her. She's like always the last person.
No, I read a list of all the best people to marry, and she's number one. But it just so happens that I also am very good friends with her. So yeah, that's where we're at. But no, I think I like Stardew Valley because all the characters are kind of getting on with their own life, and there's no extreme stereotypes. You know, there are. I mean, they have definitely taken tropes, but there's no one who's sort of, you know, oh, this person or that person is the most important. So, no, I think it's really interesting of that.
How about you, Alex? Where's your best female characters? Where are you finding?
Mine's fairly recent, actually,
Yes.
and it's Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn.
You're going to have to tell me about that because I'm old and not up to date with my games.
Cool. Well, basically, she's not interested in romance or anything like that, really. She's just interested in fighting robot dinosaurs and finding out more about her mother.
I like to fight robot dinosaurs. That sounds
Yeah.
great.
And she's quite an independent character. She's got quite a strong character, which I've really enjoyed playing through. Haven't actually finished the game. Must finish the game. I know it's very remiss of me. I've got to a certain point. I need to actually finish it because the sequel is on its way at some point. But yes, she is. I think her character is multi-layered because she's dealing with a lot of stigma, being an outsider from the tribal village that they're all a part of. She was kind of an outlaw because she was raised by an outlaw and has to kind of fight her way back into the village. So she's dealing with a lot of things which I think you as a player could connect with in some way or another. And it's not about her needing to be rescued or as an object or anything like that. It's about her quest to find out more about herself and establish her place in the tribe, etc. Yeah, really good.
So you soothed me again, Alex. You do that often. Where I was like, I'm just like, I want to go off to this peaceful world. Matt, where's your good example of women?
They're
that rare. He has to check his notes.
Yeah, I was just thinking. So I never shut up about The Last of Us Part 2.
That is true.
So I'm not going to talk about that. It was torn between two interesting ones for two separate reasons. So the first one was Senua from Senua's Sacrifice, because that is some deep shit. That is some really dark, getting sucked into the mental psyche of mental illness and despair and appalling tragedy. That is an absolute masterpiece and nothing sexual in any way. She's got awesome hair. She's got a sword which is almost as tall as she is. So that's something that really stands out, where you don't even, the rare times where you don't even think about any kind of sexual thing related to it at all. And then in another way, Alien Isolation, where it's Amanda Ripley, Ellen Ripley's daughter. That was a bloody masterpiece. Spectacularly well acted as well. I find the acting, particularly the voices, and in times when they do mocap, the acting really elevates things. And yeah, I highly recommend those two incredible women characters.
We have from the chat. Obviously, I'm going to pull this out. Mass Effect. The Legendary Edition is coming out on the 15th of May.
Addiction. You said yes. Legendary Addiction.
Freudian slip. Well, I was genuinely that close. Like, I just started. I was like, right, it's time for another Mass Effect playthrough. And then the day after I started it, I saw that the Legendary Edition was coming. So I've had to sort of put that on hold. So I'm now really like, I want to get into that. I'm very excited about playing that. And yeah, the female characters in Mass Effect are, I think the thing is that everybody in Mass Effect is sexualized in a good way. In a sort of, they are human and you can have relationships. Well, they're not human, or they are people and you can have relationships with them and you can form bonds with them. And there is no sort of difference in between the way that the men and the women are treated in that situation. And I just absolutely can't wait to replay that. But I was thinking one of my other favorite games I play at the moment has no hypersexualization of women because it has no women in it. Which is Deep Rock Galactic. I've been playing a lot of Deep Rock Galactic because it is a really good multiplayer co-op game, right? If you are looking for something fun co-op to do with your friends, your loved ones, it is great. It's got progression. You're dwarfs and you go around mining and gathering stuff. And you also get to drink beer and dance in the bar between going out and mining, which is great. But there is this thing in fantasy, and I've discovered this in RPGs as well, where there is actually a debate whether female dwarves even exist. And I realise I'm getting us off our main sort of techie console gaming theme here, but if we've got any gamers from the other sort of end of the spectrum, I'd be interested in your thoughts on whether female dwarfs exist. Right, I can see I'm losing.
Can I quickly interject again from bouncing off Daniel's comment about Mass Effect? Yeah. I have a massive gripe about games that so it's seen as a bold move to have a woman as the protagonist, and even though I think The Last of Us Part 2 and Horizon Zero Dawn are two of the biggest games that have ever been sold, two of the most profitable games ever, so it's just bullshit. But I have a massive peeve about games that say, "Oh yeah, we're super woke. You can play as a female protagonist," when it means that, oh no, we're not actually going to hedge ourselves and go, right, we'll have a female protagonist. Well, you can have both. We'll be going to be brave and give us brownie points for doing both. So yeah, fuck anyone who does that.
I think that's the thing. It's it's either give people choice or don't give people any choice at all. As you were saying with, was it Fortnite? You don't get a choice where you are, whether you're male or female. And Rust is again another one. So that's thing. Daniel has answered my concerns there, and I have heard this argument before. That female dwarves just have beards, so we think that they're men. So it's maybe I am playing as a female dwarf in Deep Rock Galactic, and I just don't know it. But yeah, just having a little scroll through my Steam collection, it's just all male protagonists. It's Batman, it's Bioshock, it's Bully, it's Skyrim. There, even bloody Harry Potter. I mean, there's just no end to this. So. We were going to try a wildcard question, and I have got a wildcard question for you, but obviously it's slightly off topic. So before I dive into it, is there anything you slightly wanted to say desperately about the hypersexualization of women in games that I haven't let you say yet? I
do.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think one of the concerns at the moment is that aside from games being more accessible, people are growing. There's a generation now that are growing up with access to computer games from birth, and we don't yet know what impact that's going to have on them in many ways. And I have a lot of interest mixed with concerns about the impact that it is going to have on them, from the whole sort of dopamine issue and concentration spans and all of those things. But I think that means that, as we were talking earlier about the dangers around hypersexualization of female and also male characters, of characters, and the potential that has for a knock-on to violence against women and girls, and just general attitudes to women in society, becomes ever more key. We do not know how this is affecting our children, and we do need to be vigilant about that, I think. And I don't want to bring it down. No. I do think it's really important. I do think it's really important.
And you also reminded me that we've been deeply remiss in not talking about the hypersexualization of women of colour. Being even more problematic in these games, and the way, particularly, I mean, black women are left out of games so often, but the way Asian women have been treated by the gaming industry, partly for various cultural reasons of gaming being very big in Asia, but there is some serious discussions to be had there that possibly for white people are not the most qualified to do. But I think it's definitely, I don't want anyone to think that it's not something that I'm equally concerned about and hasn't come across our minds either. And I think when you talk about that sort of what is the effect, and what I think there is good sentences, Caroline. What I was trying to say is basically what you've already said, which is the fact that because graphics are better is partly why this matters so much more. Because I think Bioshock Infinite, when that came out, and there's some really disturbing scenes in that with its racial abuse particularly, that I got a lot of coverage because it was just, they were able to show you the scene and show you what really looked like violence happening. And I think as we go closer to more VR games, to more realistic games, there are going to be rape games on Steam. There are going to be that sort of stuff going on. And I think that's where it becomes like we need to draw a line a long time before we get to that. So that it becomes...
That leads me into the thing I wanted to bring up, which is twofold. It's, as I think, Jem, you were saying earlier, games getting more realistic. It's getting to almost a photorealistic stage. And most video game characters are just built from scratch. They're not based off of anyone. So those images have no rights behind them. They're just a bit of art. But there are plenty of mocap actors and characters now that are literal copies of the actors who play them. And this that means there's something called source filmmaker, which is where the models of certain game characters are available online for anyone to use, so you could mod them and put them into your own game, or you can use them to create porn. So you take the video game model and you use it to create a porn film of it. And again, you could go down the road of, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just a game stuff, it's just a model, it doesn't matter. But then you think exactly what you're saying. There are going to be VR. If it exists, it can be used for porn. And so that means as it gets more real, there's going to be more porn and more of that kind of porn. It's going to get more diverse and more violent. And it's going to be, again, going from that harmless place to a more dangerous place. And then that's going to come in with not only the actors who mocap and use their actual bodies, what happens to the rights to that image of theirs to be used in this way as it gets more and more real. And also with things like deepfakes. Deepfakes are becoming worryingly and more worryingly accurate. And it won't be long before people will be commissioning photorealistic models of celebrities. Most recently, I heard there was a story in the paper about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez having her face bikini photoshopped onto a bikini body, and she is in so much danger and faces so much hatred, and that's going to be an entire new realm of danger for women that video gaming will be the heart center of.
Yeah, and that's why we need to talk about it now. We need to get it changed, and we need to change the law a bit as well.
We need to get massive so we can be the voice of that change.
Yes.
So share, and subscribe.
Nice. Got to like, share, and subscribe. So much more light-hearted, off-topic wildcard question. And I admit I did have something else, but I just thought of it when Alex said it earlier. Right, and I know this is going to sound like it's going to sound trivial. It's not another one of the Pokemon adventures, though. I promise you. I know where I'm going with this. You actually have views on this, but finishing games. Do you complete games? Do you complete? And what do you consider it means to complete a game? Does that mean getting every single achievement, or does that mean completing the whole story? Also, because I don't play as many story-based games, you see, the idea of finishing a game means something else to me. Although there is usually an end game, something like that. But yeah. So, Alex, do I judge from your earlier comment? You normally finish every game.
Normally, yes, and finishing games to me usually means getting to the credits, which is usually a story-based game, and finishing the main story. If I really like a game, though, I will complete it 100%. All the side quests, all the trophies, all the collectibles, the whole shebang. But yeah, I do have a rather sad collection of unfinished games that I must finish and haven't done in the lockdown, which I feel really bad about, because now is like the perfect time to do it. But I keep getting distracted by new games. I think that's my problem, is I'm too easily distracted. Just think, oh, there's a new shiny.
Jem's nodding, and so I'm like, do you have the same problem, Jem?
I'm a magpie when it comes to computer games. I'm literally like, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. And I actually managed to play 4 games in one day at the weekend because I was just like unable to settle on anything. And I was like, I'll do a couple of days on Stardew Valley. I'll do a bit of Dragon Age. Just started another game. It was just ridiculous. So I'm really bad at finishing games, and I think partly that's to do with lack of time, and I think partly it's to do with being a magpie, wanting to go on to the next thing. I feel this great sense of guilt for not finishing the games. I feel like, it's like, you just feel like you should finish that game before you move on to the next. And my husband is very good at reminding me that I should finish this game first, and I'm always like, no, I'm going on to this one now, I want to do this one, and then but I think, at the end of the day, the game, you play to have fun, so I don't think it really matters if you finish it or not. You play it for as long as it's fun for, and then you move on. I mean, the only issue is obviously cost, and if you've shelled out games, PlayStation games are like 50, 60 plus days, and if you've shelled out that kind of money for a game, then obviously you do want to get your money's worth. But if your money's worth doesn't take you to the end of the game, but you've enjoyed it, then I think move on, get the next one. And talking to you guys is a nightmare because I'm just finding so many games.
I also notice every time I play something on Steam, like you tend to
I go and buy it.
Oh, James obviously got that idea somewhere.
Oh, no.
Matt, do you finish all your games? Because you're mostly PlayStation, aren't you? So
yeah, you've just made me feel a bit sad, Jem, because your money investment. I was arguing with Alex about whether or not to buy the new Assassin's Creed game, and I said I was on the verge. I was either going to play Assassin's Creed Odyssey and finish the DLC for that, which I've had for the last few years, or I'll spend £100 on the Ultimate Edition of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. In the end, I compromised and got the £85 edition of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and then installed it. And this was 2 days ago. I haven't felt like playing it yet. I'm thinking, what could I have done with that £85? Or would I wait until it got a bit cheaper?
But I find this is the thing, because I have, since switching to PC gaming properly, probably about 6-7 years ago now is when I really fully committed to it. And because of various humble bundles, Steam sales, Epic Games being given out free, I've got more games than I can ever play. And I have hardly spent any money. In fact, I actually made a killing on Rust skins the other week because all the kids are playing Rust and I had all these ones I never use. And so I made 40 quid, which is going on Mass Effect when it comes out. But I think, because we got this comment from Ketch here about playing games until you feel you've mastered the gameplay, unless you really like the story. And I think actually that's a bit more me, is that I tend to play a game until I'm like, oh, okay, I've got this, I'm a god at it. I mean, like Prison Architect's a game that I played a lot of until I got to the point where I'm like, I can run any prison and it'll be amazing and it'll be fine. And then the fun's kind of gone from it, so I just moved on from it. And now if I get that urge, I play RimWorld. But I completed Skyrim. I've completed Batman, all the Arkhams and stuff like that. I think there is a difference between those story games and stuff, but there is that, as you said, Jem, it's meant to be fun. If I'm not having any fun, I'm not going to bloody well play it. So.
With particularly open world games, I have a habit of, because I get, when I do this, when I get a TV series, I get anxious when it gets close to the end because I worry about it running out. So I try and drain as much out of the world as I can until I start getting bored and I don't care as much, and then I finish the story. That's what I do with Cyberpunk, because it always gives you that, this is the point of no return. You should finish everything else now. And I go, okay. And I go and finish everything else, and then I finish it.
Yeah,
that's the way I normally go.
My Skyrim replay's been like that. I've been like, I'm going to do every single minor little bloody go and find a garnet from the other side of the planet's quest before I actually go and talk to the grey bits. Right, guys. Well, That's been fun. We are now at the end of our live hour. So for our viewers out there, just to remind you that we will be doing a live show on the first Thursday of every month. We then, after this, spend a whole hour talking without you, and we'll record another show in 2 weeks. But every Thursday at 7 p.m, you will get some content from us, whether it is a podcast, whether it is live streaming, whether it is whatever the hell it is. We are really enjoying doing this. So if you would like to, if you're enjoying it at all too, please do. What is it, Matt?
Like, share, and subscribe.
Thank you. We are on Twitch. We are on YouTube. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. We are on Twitter. Are we on anything else, Alex?
You
I can't think.
YouTube.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
So yeah, wherever you want us, find us, and it's been great. So say goodbye, everybody.